Well, welcome to the My Village Well podcast. I'm Michelle Francois Walsh, and we have really kind of one of my most favorite human beings that I've met recently with us today, Laurie Wagner. And before she gets to talk, I just want to read a few notable details about Laurie. And these are her words, so you kind of get her joie de vivre and what she brings to the world. The ceiling in my dining room is gold. The walls are blood red. I have a fire pit surrounded by a motley crew of comfy chairs in my front yard. My garden refuses to be tamed. My friends like to paint, sculpt, carve, and cast with art supplies and words. If I'm in a bleak mood, I won't try to hide it. If I'm feeling like a luminescent moonbeam, I won't hide that either. I write true stories. I hold myself to my word. I got over my fear of not measuring up to what the market wants decades ago. Interestingly, that's when I got my first book deal. Oh, and nice to meet you.
Mhm.
And so, Laurie Wagner, thank you. It felt kind of weird um, reading your words, and also like I'm putting on this really comfortable sweater, like being
Mhm.
held. And so, thank you for saying yes to being here.
My pleasure. Really happy to talk to you and excited to sort of venture out with you here.
Girl, and that we're going to do together. I mean, found you on Facebook. An ad had come up that you were doing this free, 5 day wild riding. And I think I was attracted to the name. And I'm like, well, it's free. Like, what do I have to lose? And from that is where I was just catapulted into what you bring to the world and what you do and how you help us do it. And so
Mm.
I'm wondering, can you explain yourself, Laurie Wagner? How did you start kind of recognizing perhaps that writing or words are a way for you to kind of shake out some of the stuff in your life?
Hmm. Well, let's see. So, I teach wild writing, which is this automatic writing practice where we use poetry to sort of jumpstart, but basically we're doing timed writing. So we're writing as fast as we can, pen never leaving the page for 15 minutes. And when we're doing that, we're bypassing the critical voice and bypassing all that noise that really keeps us from getting ink on the page. And instead, what we're doing is, we're connecting to the intuition and the instinct and the creative unconscious. So that's the practice. It's so simple. But, I've always, so just to sort of say that's what it is. And that alone is so much. Like that's just like a lifetime of practice just to do that. Um, but I think that, I was always one of those kids who was drawing on their walls and painting and writing songs. And I just had this need as a very young person to express myself in some way. I
Mm,
even I think about this sometimes because I used to play a lot of music and write a lot of music and even with stories, like I would do stuff, but I would never take good care of my like the tapes I would make when I would tape these songs or write them down or tape these stories or write these stories down. They were always like in the wind. They always disappeared. So it wasn't for me like creating a catalog of where I'd been. It was all in the expression. I just knew it. And
mm,
so it didn't really matter what I was doing as long as I was doing something. So it was writing or it was art making or music or something. So, but I remember, I did study journalism in school. I did have a family newspaper when I was in my early 20s. It was called The Merging Urge. If you have the urge, you must merge. Of course, I don't know how I feel about that today, but my family still has everyone in the family like had a column. My dad had a column and so oh my God, I'm watching my cat go in the truck there's a truck in my yard and it doesn't belong to me. Okay, cat's in the truck, note to self. Um, anyway, oh my God, I have to tell them so they don't like drive away with my cat. Um,
do you want me to
anyway,
hug?
no, no, no. My cat's leaving the truck now. Okay. That's really funny. Okay, I'll make a note. I think that's funny. Maybe there's something in that. There's a detail there. But I always liked to write and there were a lot of journals too. There were a lot of journal times and that kind of thing. There was
Yeah.
also journalism. There was writing for newspapers and that was that kind of thing. And so there was writing about the world. There was the time in my life in my 20s when I was writing about music and I was writing about artists, and I was doing that here in Berkeley for
Mm,
local papers, that kind of thing. And then I stumbled into essay, personal essay. And personal essay just felt like, holy moly, there's a world out there. Yeah, other people are super interesting, but life itself is just super full of details. So I think in my early 30s, I took a class in Berkeley with a woman named Cecile Muchnek, and it was not, it was essentially wild writing, what it is, but that was like 35 years ago. It was an introduction to this style of writing, and Natalie Goldberg had started it, and other
mm,
people were doing it. And then
mhm,
for the last 35 years, I've just been doing this style of writing and just staying with it so that I can understand and really ask myself, like, what's really happening with here? What is happening here? Are we writing nice stories? Like in the beginning, I thought, oh, what a nice creative way to get words on the page. But
mhm,
as I continued with people and ran class after class after class, what I started noticing was, the same people were signing up for the class after 2 months, 3 months, but they were back. And I was like, that's great.
mhm,
It's good to see you, but why are
mhm.
you back? Why are you coming back? Because
Why are
there's
you
so
here?
well, there were so many other classes they could
Yeah.
take. And people used to say, because it feels super therapeutic. It
Uh,
feels good to do this writing. And so I started to understand that it was more than just a creative writing practice, that it was also super healing. And the more I like investigated that and sat with people and wrote and did my own writing, I started to understand what's happening with this. And so that's kind of how it's all evolved over the last 35 years.
I mean, so first of all, 3.5 decades. I mean, which goes to show that it is a practice, and even the cat, like, it's like, well, life is just material, really is what it is. And so it's being open and seeing those moments. It's like the sliding door moment, right? Of
So did I love that you said that because sometimes when we sit down to write, we think we
ugh,
need a good story, we need a big story, we need and like we're all faced with that. We're all faced with this need as very young people, like I must be special. If I'm going to open my mouth, it better be good. It better be special.
right.
And meanwhile, like 97, 98% of our life is so ordinary, so unspecial, but that is our life. And so I
So
think,
true.
especially during the pandemic, I really just started to like cast my gaze down to be like, there's the cat, you know, uh, the encounter I had with the guy who's putting in the heater, the living room populated by, my ex-husband who's on the couch and my daughter who's darning a sweater and all these little bits and pieces. They're just part of the environment and maybe they're part of a story, but I'm noticing. I'm not
Well,
just, I'm not casting away what's in front of me and going, where's the big story? Gosh, the big story is right here, man.
and don't you think that when you start to view the world that way, you are more present, you are more, you know, um, in the moment of what's happening in the very moment that it is happening?
Yeah. Yeah. You're not looking past what's in front of you for
Right,
something better. And I
right,
think that has its healing component too, because when you're constantly like, can't wait for the weekend, or where's my true love, or whatever, like you miss so much.
right here.
And meanwhile, you get like old and you get older and older and you're like, where was I? I was, so I think it's, I think it's a really beautiful practice to just like, again, cast your gaze down for those tiny, tiny moments.
Expectations low, right? And get it
Yeah.
out. And I mean, I remember, you mentioned how it's been so therapeutic, and that's why people keep coming back again and again. And I remember I was lucky enough to be in the last class that you taught, because I would not get up at 8 a.m. in the morning for anyone but you, Lori, to
Mm-hmm.
write. And
Mm-hmm.
there were a few times where I would email you after, and the subject line would be like, why am I the weirdo who always cries?
Mm-hmm.
And there would be something that I had boxed from whenever,
Mm-hmm.
and it would just boop, boop, boop,
Mm-hmm.
bubble up, and I was
Mm-hmm.
able to release it. not trying to
Mhm.
fix anything, not trying to solve anything, but like it also takes, just shout out to you, a really gifted facilitator who could sacredly hold that space without comments. I think we read our pieces and there is this recognition of we see you, we love you, and then we move on to the next. We're not trying to fix. I that was glorious, I want to say.
Yeah, and I don't see crying as weird at all. I see it as like a blessing because most of us would like to cry and we
Mm,
have a lot to cry about, but we don't have access to that. And so whenever anyone cries in classes, I always feel like, oh, we're in the presence of somebody who's really, really allowing us to see who they are, and they're not in control anymore. And now we all have access to a part that we understand that we can't often find because we're so clamped down. Speaking for myself, when I'm in the midst of people who cry, it's never a weirdo thing. It's always like, here comes the
mm.
blessing, here comes the blessing.
It's so true. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. It's such an honor to walk with someone as they are experiencing that. Yeah, there's
Yeah, and I
that.
think we just mirror for each other in there. So because
Mm,
we don't do feedback, we're not critiquing. And so
hmm
what we're eventually trying to do over time is sacrifice our facade so that we're not doing our thing anymore, where we're like,
hmm
here I am
hmm
being the funny one, here I am
hmm
being the weird one, or whatever thing you think everyone sort of thinks that people like them for a certain thing they do. Well, when we drop that and we're
hmm
actually able to be without that kind of mask, and you sit with people and you let them see you like that, that's super healing. Plus, we get to see each other in each other. We're all just mirrors of each other. So we're all doing the healing together. As I watch you move through yours, I connect to what's true for me in that. It's
hmm
it's really so simple and so rich.
hmm And so for someone perhaps that, I can use the example like for me, I picked writing back up during the pandemic because we were all held hostage. And I needed to express, but like I hadn't written really consistently because I had a diary when I was a kid and it got read by someone, and I won't say who, but like I clamped it down, And so for someone who may be hesitant to express, maybe do you have any like words and wishes for that person to give themselves the freedom to do that?
Hmm. And yeah, and also as you say that, I'm thinking there's so many different ways to express
Mm,
what's inside of us. And writing isn't for everyone, not everyone wants to use words, but let's pretend they do. Let's pretend,
hmm
this is an invitation to people, especially people who don't consider themselves writers. Or I was never, I love that when someone says, like, oh, I'm not a writer. I love that because writing is just speaking aloud on the page. And if
hmm
you can speak and you can relax, then you can write. And so two things. One is I think wild writing really, and the practice of holding space and setting it up for people is learning how to help people relax. Because when we're relaxed, we're okay. We're fine. We can show up. We don't feel like we need to overreach to show up. We can just be ourselves. And so what's the point of expressing yourself? Why would someone want to do that? Um, I'm remembering something a long time ago. Someone who became a very good friend, who is a good friend, interviewed me, and we were talking about like all the stuff that's inside of us.
hmm
And um, I was a young mother at the time, and I just remembered that uh, I was always just so mashed up and moving so fast that I would just take the parts in me and just stuff them back in, and
Sure.
then and then just hope that, like, my lungs were attached to my, I was
hmm
just a mess. But I think that what I'm trying to say is that using words inside of us to just sort of navigate and locate where we are, and to take the time to navigate and locate yourself is a
Mm,
kind of psychic alignment,
mhm,
because you're talking to yourself. You're not
mhm.
just chatting out to the world. You're not just streaming or texting. You're actually speaking to yourself. And when you're doing that, you're aligning with yourself. And what I noticed when people would come to the house for years and years, and we'd do this work inside, and then we would be done, everyone would come to the front door and we would all leave. Things were just brighter because we had found a kind of alignment with our words. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It makes complete sense.
We had spoken to ourselves in an
Yes.
honest way,
Mm,
with authentic language, and we had risked telling the truth to ourselves. And in doing so, we heard ourselves, and something in us settles when we speak to ourselves that way, when we speak to other people that way. So what's so even the people who don't consider themselves writers have found in this practice a relaxed way to meet themselves on the page with something true,
mhm.
whether they want to call themselves a writer or not. It's really, that's just an ego thing. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
We're using writing as a tool to speak to ourselves and to speak to other people.
Oh, it is so, it's like air in your lungs when you are able to, I call it kind of a release valve too. And part of it, I know in my own walk is like documenting these girls, these kids. Wait,
Mhm,
what's happening? Like they're almost gone. Ah. And I felt like it would never happen. I'm like, oh my God, if somebody asked me for one more thing, and it's like, but wait,
mhm, mhm,
and so in a way, it's this
mhm,
honoring in my own chapter and in theirs of motherhood
mhm,
of like
mhm,
who they are becoming. I don't want to forget. I don't,
mhm,
when one of them says something so tender to another, I don't want to forget it. And so I
mhm.
document it, and then
Beautiful. Mhm,
morbidly when I'm gone,
mhm, mhm,
they'll have that, they'll have those
mhm.
stories.
And
So,
yeah, and I think that like the attention to detail, like to those moments that you're talking about that you document, what you're doing, what you've already and probably were doing, but we certainly are doing that in wild writing too, is we're sort of um, highlighting our antennas so that we are noticing, so we are picking up. And so what we pick up might end up on the page, but it's definitely happening in our real life. It's happening to us in real time. So like this morning, same thing. I was, or yesterday morning, or some morning, who knows when, yesterday or today, I had, like a kind of an agenda, like I'm gonna get up, I'm gonna get to the gym, da 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 da. But one of my kids came in, and the next thing I knew, we were having like a real conversation in the living room at 7 in the morning. And I was aware that this was happening. And I was aware that there would be, that I was gonna let some other stuff go.
yeah.
I was aware how important this is. And that kind of awareness might land on the page, but it's already landing right here in my heart. And so that's again why awareness, presence, noting, is healing. That it lands on our page. How beautiful is that? That's the other thing I want to say. You know how I said earlier, like people are always like, the big story. I'm like, I need to write about something important. That thing that happened with my kid was like the most important thing. And it could have been so lost to me. It could have been so lost to me if I wasn't already casting my gaze down to what was already right in front of me.
Mm,
And that's the other thing. I just want to say it one more time more clearly. And I'm saying it for myself because it's so it feels important, which is that when we recognize the life we have and we tune, this phrase, like, I want what I have, not what I don't have.
hmm
I want what I have It's very different from that sort of commercial consumer culture, which is can't wait for that, or maybe what
Mhm.
I'll get that. It's already, what have you already got? And the wild writing is really asking us to look at what's right at our feet now, as opposed to what we don't have. And that again is healing, and especially during the pandemic, because we were cut off from the things we
Mhm.
like to do. We like to travel. We like to be able to go out to dinner and to the movies. It seemed like a loss, but at the same time, it highlighted what was already right in front of us. And so
Mhm.
recognizing what we already have, this is big for me too. It's like, oh, okay, I'm fine. It's all here.
And even like you sharing about your sweet bean in the living room, when you do that, whether it's here on the page, wherever it lands, and I go, uh-huh, because
Right.
I flash to a moment on my floor that I had with one of mine, and everything else is just background noise. And you go,
Yeah.
I'm here right now. So we also, like you're saying, the mirroring, the seeing one another,
Yeah.
sharing these moments.
That's the community healing part. It's community healing. Yeah, I know. So it's all that stuff. We call it a writing practice, but it's really an attention listening practice. So much listening. And I think too, someone said that recently, like this is a listening practice. And I think something about, I was thinking about it today. There's like a loneliness epidemic in this country. And I
Mm.
know you wouldn't know it because you have a house full of children and stuff. You're like, get out of here. But
Mhm.
there's there's something about being with people, especially in circle, and writing and just listening without crosstalk. And then the next person gets to speak and everyone's listening. That's very, it almost feels a little radical these days that we would take the time to gather knee to knee to listen to one another without crosstalk. That we would do that. We're not fixing anything, we're not solving anything. I know, but it's so healing. I think we're lonely, and especially in the era of all our devices,
Mm.
I know what it's like to pick up the phone first thing in the morning and to search for some dopamine rush. And
Mm.
it's very different than what it is to be in a room full of people listening and speaking when it's your turn and listening.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's how we're meant to be. I mean, I feel like I say that over and over. We are meant to be with one another.
Mm,
We are meant to walk with one another. Um, we just are. That's how we were created. And so I know that I feel infinitely grateful that I found you on this. Oh my God, I'm so emotional. Okay.
mm.
Why am I the weirdo who always it's like joyful? Blah. I
Hey,
had a
thank you. Thank you for your emotion. Thank you for your emotion.
I had a fantastic role model in both my mom and my dad, but especially my dad, who
Mm,
is very
mhm,
not afraid to show that. And so
mhm,
I just feel very grateful that we've crossed paths um, and that you are bringing this work to the world. And I cannot wait to join you for wild writing teacher training. It feels very aligned and right, and the fruits that will be, born from that. And so, for other folks that kind of want to find you,
mhm.
get their like paws on you to learn more about you, what would be the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, well, go to my website, which I'm sure you'll put in the link or something,
I will.
27powers.org. We have a membership, and the membership is a closed membership, but we open it 2 or 3 times a year, so we'll probably open it in the spring. And it's a membership, it's called the Wild Family, and everyone who's in it gets 3 short videos a week where I'm warming the waters and reading a poem and then giving them jump off lines. And then there's a platform where people can share their work. And then every 2 weeks we go live and we write together. So that's a practice. That's the membership practice. And that's for people who just want to be in practice. It's whether they're writing 2 times a week or 1 time a week, they've got it. And we've also got a nice campfire where you can come and read. And so just opportunities for people to gather like that and write, do the wild writing. Um, I travel and I take this work on the road with my friend Andrea Shear, and I know we've got another trip in Taos, New Mexico in April, and that's also on the list. And that's really it's the traveling, and sometimes there's some workshops more local, but that's the best way to be in touch. And I think the Wild Family is probably that, and there's some other little things on that just get them started.
Beautiful. I mean, one of the best prompts I think that you gave us, you would offer us jump off lines, but you're like, if none of those work, hey, today's Thursday and here's what I know, you know?
And you know why that works? Yeah, I know it seems like, well, where do you start? But the poem, because we use these poems, and the
Yeah.
the poem is a kind of like psychedelic medicine because it's the world of poetry. So it's
Yeah.
got this sort of psychedelic component that fuses us with this
Mhm.
colorful poetic magic. And then from there, we can write. So
Mhm. I love
yeah.
it.
And my favorite, probably my favorite line of all of those lines though is a few things I won't be writing about.
Totally.
The best line.
I probably shouldn't be telling you this. It's like, get it out, get it out. And so, you guys, Laurie Wagner, thank you so much for making time, space to be with us today in the village. I will put all of your information
Mhm.
in the show notes, and Lori and I are just whew, wishing you abundant blessings in all the ways and however they come. And you know where to find us at the village. And so thank you for popping by. And Lori, thank you for your time today.
It's my real pleasure. Thank you so much. Love talking about process.
Tawanda, baby. I'll see you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.